For Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Hepner, and pleased to be joined by Janos Botschner, an expert in cybersecurity. And Janos, I'll let you fill us in on your role in the work that you do in this area.
Well, thanks. It's great to be with you and your audience today. We've just completed a multi-year initiative looking at cybersecurity in Canadian agri-food, focusing largely on Canadian producers. They've really helped us to understand that cybersecurity in ag is a critical farm business risk management opportunity, but it's also a business development opportunity. If you have a really good line of sight into any of your digital operations, which increasingly we understand are going to be essential to creating efficiencies, productivity, and profitability opportunities for producers and for Canada on the world stage. If you have that kind of line of sight, you'll be better able to manage your bottom line as well as see new business opportunities that can help you to thrive as a farm business or as part of the broader food value chain. So some of the things we've learned from producers and others is not only is this a critical farm business opportunity, but it's something that should never be on the shoulders of producers alone. We all have a role to play in strengthening cyber preparedness and cyber resilience across our food system. But today, understandably, it hasn't been a big priority. And so what we're really trying to do is help to participate in these conversations to raise awareness and to really help people to start to take those initial steps that are going to make it a little bit harder every day for those bad guys to take advantage of our vulnerabilities and make a profit on the backs of our producers and others.
Mm-hmm. So farmers, Janos, we're used to thinking about risk.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
Something that farmers have always done.
You bet.
Cyber risk, though, what does that look like, or where are we at risk in that arena? Is that part of what you talk about when you talk about raising awareness? Is just knowing what the risks are?
That's absolutely right. Number one, you have to understand if you have any digital parts of your operations. If you have one laptop connected to the internet, you have a digital component to your farm business. It's understanding what those digital components are, what your key digital business assets are that you want to protect. Just like, if you're a rancher, you want to protect your livestock from those coyotes sniffing along the fence line. It's the same thing here. What are your key business assets that you want to protect, and what are the vulnerabilities? So the most common ones are, are we using the wrong, or are we using passwords that are too simple? Have we given access to our credentials to people that shouldn't have them? Are our systems not configured properly to make sure that they work as well as they could? Have we asked questions of our vendors about the safeguards that they're putting in place to help us use their equipment and their services well? And maybe are there some problems with the way things are connected to one another that create opportunities for those bad guys to look into our operations and then see a hole in the fence, get in there, and cause trouble. And causing trouble could mean stealing data and holding it for ransom. It could be stealing financial information and selling it on the dark web and coming back for more later, committing fraud or having someone else commit fraud. The list goes on, but I think the basic things are awareness of your digital operations, awareness of the things you want to protect, talking among yourselves and talking to your IT service providers, insurance providers, agronomists, business people, and others about how I can protect my digital assets better, and just make that a business development opportunity, doing something different every year to enhance your preparedness, and think about how you would recover if things do happen.
Going back to that basic one of passwords, I think that is one that we're all familiar with, and I think most people, if you surveyed them, would admit that they, or at least somebody they know well, doesn't do a great job with password security. What does that look like if you're looking to increase or decrease your risk in that area?
Yeah, I mean, number one, don't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
ABC 1, 2, 3.
Don't use ABC. Don't use my password. And also, a lot of us are active on social media. A lot of producers, are on social media, and they're rightfully proud of their success feeding Canadians, or maybe they're proud of their kids' performance in the local hockey tournament. If you're putting too much personal information online, you're creating an opportunity for the bad guys to learn something about you that might actually show up in a password. So try to avoid any personally meaningful passwords. There are a lot of tips online that you can look up. Some people like to use combinations of 3 words and a few numbers and characters. Others will use password manager software. Those can be good solutions as well. The main thing is, don't be obvious. Don't use the same password for more than one account. Don't share your passwords, because that could open you up to maybe losing some insurance coverage or other kinds of coverage if you're not complying with due diligence, and making things harder for the bad guys who want to just get in there and use some AI software to try all kinds of different passwords. They can do that as well. So don't be too obvious about yourself, and don't make it too easy for AI enables password breakers to do their job. Make it a little bit complex.
You mentioned working with vendors and companies that you're working with. Of course, from a convenience perspective, technology has unlocked all kinds of convenience for us on farms, whether it's Wi-Fi connected devices or other ways of managing barns from remote locations, that type of thing. How do we go about, what do you recommend for a farmer in terms of managing that risk and navigating whether a vendor or a company is somebody that they can trust with their data? I know there are some efforts out there in terms of data transparency and where data goes, but how do we navigate to make sure that's not a vulnerable spot where all of a sudden somebody else can intrude into or find a back door into something?
We've created a tool based on feedback from producers with a set of some key questions you could ask vendors. It's readily accessible through the Community Safety Knowledge Alliance. But some of the key principles are, what kinds of safeguards do you have in place to protect my data? How do you control access to critical customer data? Can you explain this to me? What would you do in the event of an intrusion? Are you able to detect whether or not someone is, breaking into your system? Do you have any previous experiences with loss of customer data? You can look up online whether a particular vendor or service provider has had any problems with loss of customer data. So it's really starting to ask some questions to get them to tell you what they're doing to protect you, so that it's not just about you. I would also suggest, where you have commodity associations that want to take an interest in this, a collective voice is louder, and so those associations and other groups can then approach, key vendors and equipment manufacturers and say, hey, what are you doing for our members? Can you explain to us what you're doing to safeguard that relationship, which is important to your reputation, but more importantly, it's critical to their success as business people. So tell us what you're doing to protect them. The analogy I like to draw is it's a little bit like the automotive consumer protection movement in the 60s and 70s. We enjoy 3-point seat belts, airbags, crumple zones, all kinds of safety features today, because back then people said car manufacturers need to do better. And then car manufacturers realized, if I do better, it's good for my reputation, and I can market my vehicles as safer vehicles. So it actually became a win-win situation for everybody. But it started with people saying, we have some questions we'd like to ask you.
Mm-hmm. We've seen some incidences here in the last half year. In some cases, it would be with vendors that farmers work with, where there's been ransomware attacks and that type of thing. Are there certain steps we can take to prevent that risk to our farm of being a victim of ransomware? Is it as simple as making sure you have backups of your latest data, that type of thing?
Well, I think that's an important question. If we're thinking about risk management around your access to critical business data, you should have a backup. Some people will have written backups depending on the nature of their records. Some people will have digital backups. If you have a digital backup on the memory stick, don't tape it to the side of your computer in your barn.
No.
So, put it somewhere safe, maybe even off-site completely, so that you can access it again if you need that historical, crop data that's vital to your business. So really think about that. Your historical data, your financial data, those are critical business assets that you want to be able to safeguard, so that even if there's a breach on someone else's part, you're not going to be prevented from continuing your business. Now, if there's a breach of your personal information, that's a different category of problem, but make sure that you can continue your operations even if someone else has lost your data.
You mentioned AI before.
Yeah.
How concerned are you about the potential there in terms of our risk if AI becomes something that we maybe even can't wrap our heads around at this point?
Yeah, well, it's huge. There are two sides of the coin. One side is it's accelerating what the bad guys can do. It's making it easier for the bad guys. The other side of the coin is it can make it a little bit easier to notice whether the bad guys have gotten into your system. So, it works both ways. The main problem, though, is the pace of change is so fast that we as individuals, if you're a business owner, you can't keep up with all of those changes. But when you think collectively and act collectively and share information, for example, big providers, telecos, others share threat intelligence with one another. And so they can start to work, as they already do, but start to, move that effort down into agricultural production to stay ahead of the game in ways that producers couldn't possibly do, and we shouldn't expect them to do. Mm-hmm. But it's letting people know what our expectations are so that we can get the help we need when we need it. But it's moving fast. So as a critical infrastructure, our food system has to be collaborating to be better prepared and more resilient in the face of the speed of change that's already starting to take place.
Yeah. Is flying under the radar a good strategy?
The idea of security through obscurity doesn't hold anymore. The world's connected, so someone across the planet is as close as your next door neighbor when it comes to cyber vulnerabilities or cyber threats. So you have to take it seriously. You could be targeted in Winkler, just like somebody could be targeted in Toronto or New York or London or anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Final question then, Janos. You mentioned earlier on in our conversation how there's a societal aspect to this as well, where it shouldn't rest only on the individual business owner, private business owner, such as a farmer. What's the role of society in this, and how do you see that playing out in a Canadian situation?
Yeah, I think there's a really important role for sector leadership, and I'm encouraged to see some of that starting to happen now. Everyone who has a stake in our food system has a voice that can help us to understand what this problem looks like and how to help different stakeholders be better prepared and more resilient. So if a planner, far from the farm field, thinks that they have the answers and they haven't spoken to producers, they're going to get it wrong. Similarly, we can't expect producers to understand every aspect of that threat environment. So people who are looking at that every day have a voice that they can bring to the equation. So the more we talk together, listen carefully to what one another's needs are, and start to collaborate to build systems, to share information, maybe create incentives so producers can take care of their cybersecurity needs in ways that make financial sense to them as businesses. And also, start to think about, well, what can we do to lower the risk situation for small and medium businesses, as well as push resources out to people who need them when they need them in ways that they find useful. We're building better preparedness, and we're going to be in a better position as things continue to change quickly.
Yeah. I said final question, but I do have one more question. And maybe this is putting you on the spot, but geopolitically, are you concerned that there's going to be more risk in the world going forward if we have more of a multipolar world instead of a U.S., just in terms of the direction of geopolitics globally?
Well, we know that that's the case. We know that cyber disruptions are part of the toolkit of a number of different nation states out there, and we know that when we are in adversarial relationships with some of those nation states, depending on how hot that gets, we could expect things like what has already happened. We could have a commodity, the reputation of a commodity besmirched by someone through misinformation, or we could have an attack on our supply chain that is easily deniable by the perpetrator. It looks like it's been done by a criminal outfit, but that criminal outfit could have been hosted in an adversary's territory. So we have to be realistic. We don't want to panic, but we have to understand that there's a certain kind of likelihood that these things will occur. And the more complicated our geopolitical relations get, the more likely something like that could happen. So again, the more we can talk together, share information, collaborate effectively. We've got the Five Eyes: Canada, the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. Those kinds of intelligence sharing alliances can really do a good job when they work well.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for answering the additional question, because that's certainly something that I think is quite relevant. And thank you for sharing your insight on this important topic today, Janos.
Nice to be with everyone.